Okay, welcome folks. I see people coming into the room now. I'm just going to wait a moment here to make sure people have a chance to join. Just going to wait another moment. I know there were lots of registrants for this webinar, so I want to make sure everyone's got a chance to get in here past the top of the hour. And I know a lot of you, I can see names already joining us from Alberta. So you're a couple hours behind us here in Ontario, where it's 12 noon Eastern. As you come in, take a moment, maybe just throw in the chat box where you're calling in from today. Where's your home studio? You can even tell us how the weather is. It's that time of year where we're all wondering about the weather, and different parts of the country have different weather going on. Some of us are feeling like we're into summer. Some of us are in spring. Some of us can see winter in the trees still. Take a moment just to tell us where you're at and let's connect. Kim is in New Brunswick and you're overcast today. I'm here at the Conservatory Canada TV home studio in Thunder Bay, Ontario, where it's finally sort of spring. And Sean is in Sherwood Park, just outside Edmonton. No snow, then you got some rain. Hey, that's kind of neat. That's a sign of spring out there. That's great. So hi, everyone. I'm Derek Auger. I'm the Executive Director of Conservatory Canada. Welcome to the Friday webinar. In May here, as you've seen in the inbox, we're going to wind down the Friday webinars at the end of May. We've got 3 more weeks. I'll just tell you briefly what I have planned for the next 3 weeks, and then I'll turn things over to Eleanor and Cecile, who are going to entertain you as always. Today's May 6th, so May 13 next week, we're going to have mock exam number 2. I managed to record a really good student a few days ago doing a contemporary idioms piano level 5 exam. And for a lot of you that are curious about it, I think you're really going to want to see this. It may be your first look at what a contemporary idioms piano exam looks like. And once we get to level 5, it gets a little more interesting. You're going to see more skills. You're going to see more depth to the knowledge. And I think you're going to want to see this. So that we're going to run next Friday, the 13th, a week from today exactly. And then between May 20th, right before the May long weekend, and the 27th, I have two more planned. I plan to record another webinar shortly, or a mock exam shortly. So one of those will be mock exam, probably a low-level grade for classical piano, again, similar to the grade 4 we had 3 weeks ago. And then the other webinar will be a sneak peek at digital badges. I want to devote probably the final session of the month to digital badges and get all of you excited about launching this in the coming months. And I'm sure some of you have heard me talk about it already. And if you want to learn more, that's going to be a great session. At the end of May, we're going to stop Friday webinar for the year. We'll pick it up again either in late summer or early fall, more likely in September, I think. Makes more sense. I know come June, we're very busy around here, Conservatory Canada, with exams and doing those by and large, or either by flex or in person. And then also, we're trying to launch a new database. And so that's going to get very busy for us in June. We've got a number of other things going on. I know teachers are working on wrapping up their teaching studios, recitals, their exam preps, all those kind of things. So we're going to take a hiatus, probably a 3-month hiatus for Friday webinar. And you'll notice Friday webinar, I've got plans in my mind here creatively to rebrand the webinar a little bit, expand the reach of it, make it a little easier for you to watch. And I'll let you know more details about that later in August. Okay, so our presentation today, this is part 3, using music by women composers, performance practice ideas for the Romantic era. And I'm going to turn this over to Cecile and Eleanor. And Eleanor, I believe you're starting off. Everyone, just so you know, you'll get a replay link on this to your inbox, hopefully later today, if not on the weekend. So thanks, Eleanor and Cecile, for joining us. I'll let you take it away.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Great to see everybody here again. So today we're going to be talking about early Romantic repertoire for the elementary level. So the first person I'd like to talk about is Marie Jael. Marie was born in 1846 in the Alsace region of France. She was the daughter of a farmer who became the village's mayor. Her father brought home a piano on a horse-drawn wagon when she was 6. Rather than going to school, she was taught at home, leaving her free time to practice piano. At age 16, she enrolled for 4 months at the Paris Conservatoire. Upon her graduation, she was awarded first prize in the women's class. Jael toured Europe and gave recitals throughout her teens. Just before her 20th birthday, she married pianist Alfred Jael, who was 15 years older. The two of them toured and performed throughout Europe. Marie Jael was the first person to, or the first pianist to perform all the Beethoven sonatas in Paris. She began composing in her mid-20s and studied composition briefly with César Franck and then mostly with Sasson for the next 20 years. She published 80 works, including 2 piano concertos, a cello concerto, vocal and orchestral works, and many piano pieces. Her piano compositions really reveal a wide range of styles, bridging the late Romantic to Impressionism. So she was really, the early 1800s was the crossroads, moving from the harpsichord to the piano as an instrument. So she took an interest in piano design and experimented with touch on different pianos. She turned her focus to the the development of a comprehensive approach to piano playing, combining scientific analysis, musical artistry, and technique. So there were a lot of changes to the physical piano. There were heavier hammers, thicker strings with more tension. The force required from the player to depress a key more than doubled between 1800 and 1860. The key length also increased along with the height of the black keys. So the piano now required a more vigorous attack with extended fingers rather than the quiet hand and curved fingers techniques of the 17th century, more associated with harpsichord playing. So the piano instruction also changed. Czerny and Hummel advocated for daily hour-long lessons for beginners. They encouraged the hand to be rounded and in a free and quiet position. The arms were not involved in the playing or the production of the tone. Czerny actually wrote a lot of exercises, as I'm sure many of you know, literally hundreds of them. So his idea was you would develop technique through hours and hours of diligent practice. He even recommended that since the student will probably find these exercises rather dry, let him place a book or newspaper on the piano desk to read while playing them. So the idea of introducing musical elements too early could be too dangerous. So Jael really stepped away from that and said, wait a minute here. We don't just practice for the sake of practicing, because that can cause a lot of tension in the hand. If we're just doing these exercises robotically, there's really no point in it, and really all you can do is damage the hand. So this was an era where Hanon was also very popular. And I have to admit, I teach Hanon a lot, and I'm kind of, after reading about her, I'm kind of rethinking my approach to Hanon. So Jael stressed the importance of preparatory technical exercises that included varieties of dynamics, rhythm, and every kind of touch. The mental development was as important as the physical. So my teacher in university, at the University of Manitoba, was Marek Jablonski, and his philosophy was when you practice, you never practice without being musical. Every note you play should be musical from the time you sight read the piece. So Jael's philosophy was that the control of the hand must begin in the mind and develop in combination with an awareness of the sensation at the tips of the fingers, combined with deep listening. Proper training would involve the coordination of movement, awareness, and sensory perception. She believed in the importance of continuous movement, especially circular movement and movement of the wrist. She asked the student to land on the middle of the key using the weight of the hand and then slide the finger in a subtle pulling back motion toward the body as the key is released. She called these slidings or glisses, much like the violinist continues moving the bow after it leaves the string. So if you think producing a sound on the violin, the bow begins, the movement begins, then the bow lands on the string, producing the sound, and as it lifts off the string, the violinist's arm continues the movement. It doesn't just stop when they want the sound to stop, unless they want that abruptness of sound. In the playing of single notes or during rests, the pianist's movement on the key away from the keyboard would have a corresponding curved movement in the air, returning the hand to its starting position for the next note. She referred to these as curves or cours. I actually experimented with this with a student this past week after reading about it, and we were working on the Beethoven Sonata Opus 10, number 1, the C minor. We were doing the second movement, and there's a passage. So my student was playing. Because I'd asked her to lift off the rest. So I talked about this. This particular student also studied violin for a number of years. And I said, imagine how you would play this on the violin with these chords in the left hand. So floating off the chords. So immediately, the sound is so much more musical then. Just lifting off the rests. Jael collaborated with Dr. Charles Ferre, the medical superintendent of the psychiatric clinic near Paris. He was interested in whether fingerprints could provide insight into personality and higher cognitive development. So together they conducted experiments taking fingerprints of pianists trained in the traditional manner, so repetitive exercises, think Hanon. So strong fingers, curved fingers, rapid motion into the keys, and those trained in Jael's method. So I found this really fascinating. I'm going to share my screen with you. So these are the fingerprints. So the top, you can see how the fingerprints are just tiny little dots. And on the picture below, it's more of the complete finger, but there's also more pressure. The prints are darker. So this is where she advocated placing the finger on the key. It's a term I sometimes use with students called squishing. And I know Marek Jablonski talked about using the pads of the fingers to create a warm sound. So playing more with the pads, a more extended, flatter hand, rather than curved fingers attacking with the tip of the finger. That will give you a very bright sound, suitable for sonatinas or any passage where you want that brightness of sound. But if you want a warmer sound, it's more squishing into the keys. So Jael wrote 3 volumes of pedagogical material, not including only touch, but also how to sit at the piano and a list of works to be studied. So the first piece I want to show you, and again, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, it's Petit Lutin. And she also talked a lot about lightness of touch. So one of the things Jael promoted was playing softly, which is much more difficult actually than playing loudly. And if you look at the dynamics indicated here, we start pianissimo, and we only have a mezzo forte in the 3rd line in the left hand, then back down to piano. And really, other than the mezzo forte in the left hand, everything is piano and pianissimo. This is a tricky piece to play, and I have to admit my approach to the piece changed once I read about her methods. At first I thought I was playing it too loudly, much too heavy. So a lightness of touch, but it's also about landing squarely on the keys, otherwise you miss. So this is continuous movement going through the keys and requires graceful movement. Otherwise, that's what happens. So I think it's a tricky piece, but I think it's a good piece to develop a lot of the technique. The next one is the chanson d'Urcant. So she talked about circular motion, and this is definitely demonstrates circular motion in the right hand. So I was actually giving this to a student this week, and I'll be giving it to another student next week. The second student actually loves to play fast, and he's not ready to play fast, and now he's injured. His left wrist is sore. So I said, okay, I've been teaching him online for, I guess, over 2 years now, which can be challenging. But he wasn't listening to me. He wanted to play fast. That was everything the faster the better. And so anyway, we had a talk about the need to play slowly and to loosen the wrist and to start moving more in circular motion. There was another exercise I gave him by Frank. We'll talk about that in a minute. So one more piece by Jael, the Après la Valse. So here again, lightness of touch, two note slurs, but you notice the tenuto marks under the right hand notes. So again, landing squarely on the keys with a slight pressure. So really incredibly beautiful piece. But again, teaching that two note slurs, great piece for that. Something I love in this is just a little bit of change of harmony. We have this wonderful B sharp here, and then we get the B sharps again here at the end. And it just adds such beautiful color. It's a little thing. It's just one of those moments. All right, so I would like to turn it over now to Cecile.
Can you see me? Okay, good, because I can. So hi everybody. Now today I would like to talk to you about Mel Bonis, in particular her album Pour les tout petits, our album for the little ones. It was published in 1913. And listening to Eleanor, I realized that she had a very similar approach to the piano. and piano technique. So they have many things in common. Both were in France. It was published by Edition Comte. It's available also on freescores.com, and Eleanor published 6 of them in the volume 1. First, who was she? She was born in France, in Paris, in 1858, and died in 1937. A prolific and very inspired composer, I have to say. She wrote more than 300 pieces, mostly for piano. She wrote a bit of chamber music. She was from a bourgeois family, middle class. Let's say she was not encouraged in her musical pursuits. She was living in a big house, probably inherited by the grandparents. Anyway, there was an old piano there that she discovered as part of the furniture. And she loved it, and basically she taught herself. And her parents were totally opposed to her musical studies. But when she was 12 years old, a family friend convinced them that she was so gifted that she really deserved piano lessons to develop. She was lucky to meet composer César Franck, who took her as a piano and organ student, and had her entered the Conservatoire de Paris, Conservatoire de Musique de Paris, in 1876. I think it's worth to note that the Conservatoire de Paris had only opened to women students 6 years earlier, in 1870. Anyway, she studied piano and composition there and was a very successful student. Just to give you an idea, she was in the same classes as Claude Debussy, same generation. Now, unfortunately, after a few years, her parents forced her to leave the Conservatoire. Added to the fact that they were not supportive of her music training, she also fell in love with a singer, a voice student, voice who was studying composition. And so that was not a good future husband, let's say. So they took her out of there and arranged for her a marriage with a man 20 years her senior, who was twice widowed and had already 5 sons. They had 3 more children, so that kept her busy and explained her 10 years gap in composition. Her husband, same as her parents, had no interest in music whatsoever, and she found no support for her composition. Nevertheless, 10 years later, she returned to composition, and having adopted the pseudonym Mel to hide the fact that she was a woman. And she did that from the very beginning, from her very first official piece in 1881. Like I said earlier, she wrote mostly piano music, but for all levels. Today, we're looking at the very beginners, but she wrote concert pieces also. And her music was played by the best performers in the most renowned concert halls of Europe. In fact, I saw concert programs where she appears on the same footing as Maurice Ravel. She was also the first woman to join the Society of Composers of Music, of which she became secretary in 1910, a unique achievement for a woman at the time. And so in that capacity, she was in contact, she worked closely with the elite of the music world in Paris. So now this set, it's 20 pieces for beginners. It was dedicated, she wrote it when she was older, and she dedicated that book to her grandchildren. Some are very easy to learn, some are a bit more challenging, but they go from level 1 to level 4. Very accessible for young kids. If I show you just one page, you'll see there's the design is attractive, big notes, easy to read. So that's the first edition. The titles are clearly, the titles create clear associations with moments narrated in music. The pieces illustrate iconic moments in the life of a child. For example, you have titles like Raindrops, Mireille at the Piano, Dear Friend, The Little Beggar, New Ronron, that describes a cat, Puppets. So those are titles that bring immediate images to the children. They know they're describing something. They can invent stories. And I think that's very important from the beginning to make musical connections. Her style is romantic in inspiration with colors of Impressionism and a touch of Orientalism. You think she was the same generation as Debussy? They studied together. It's very poetic. Expressivity is really at the heart of her concerns, but it's very often off the beaten path. You have sudden turns or harmonies that are really surprising, chromaticism that you didn't expect. Also, what's I find remarkable is that if expression, poetry, and color are indeed her priorities, her writing is always linked to a profound pedagogical reflection. Those pieces are indeed great pedagogical tools to introduce new elements to students in a useful performance, but always attractive ways. Her pieces are beautifully written, but she thinks about the children all the time, and you feel that they're well adapted to the children's hands, their size, and their musical development. So psychology, like Eleanor was saying earlier, there's less thought about the mechanical. The technique is still important, but there's less concern about the mechanical work and more about the psychology, the way children are learning. And they're always beautiful. So they always fit well in the recitals program. They're comfortable to play and they're fun for the kids. And yeah, at a time when piano education is still very austere, she introduces the notion of pleasure in compositions. For her, the happiness of the young pianists is essential. They have to love playing the piano in order to learn faster and to progress. And of course, I find it important that children would be introduced to women composers, to works by women composers as soon as possible. And those pieces are a great way to introduce them to women composers of the past, opening their minds to diversity from the very beginning of their piano lessons, to a question that is now crucial. Now, I have to say that I approached those pieces from the piano teacher perspective, but let's say my inner child was very present. I discovered those pieces when I was 7 with the sewing machine, and I just loved that piece. And I had that very book here. And of course, it got lost as I grew up. And I was so happy when it was out of print for many, many years. And a few years ago, I found it again in Montreal. And in spite of the high price, let's say, it was about, yeah, it was $50 for, I just couldn't leave it there. I was so happy because I had been looking for that book for years. So now, La Puce would be, is listed at level 1. So before I talk about it, I'm just gonna play it. So you're describing a flea. It's in C major. The register is pretty, limited. It goes from C to F. So the child stays there. It's easy to, cover. Mostly staccato touch, which is the easiest, the most natural for a child at the beginning, involving the use of gravity for a minimum of effort to create the sound. And it's a fun, playful physical movement. That kind of, it involves the coordination, involvement and coordination of the whole relaxed arm rather than finger work. So this comes before, of course, strengthening the fingers. Now, there's no dynamics except for the F, the cluster at the end. So that makes it easier. They don't have too many things to think about. There's that passage here that Eleanor was talking about with Marie-Jaël, the 2 notes and the movement of the wrists. That's very, very relaxed. That usually comes easily after the detached, the staccato touch. The introduction of the wrist movement to create just the right sound. Also, because of the way they're written, you go white, black, white, black, white, black. It's very, and the hands are not too far, they're rather close. It's very comfortable to play because again, you're using gravity to move from white keys to black keys. There's a few sharps and flats as they come. So it's a good piece to get used to those sharps and flats. And it's good, like I said, to get that kind of positions early on, because also it's the hands of the children are in a perfect position. They get used to having the wrist at the right height because you're playing on both white and black. So it comes naturally, and they get used to this. It becomes they put that position on automatic pilot. The concept of handprints, because you have a few skips and you need to take time to place your hands. So you kind of finger memory, physical memory, you learn the distances, you're more and more comfortable moving on the keys. There, see, you go from this and you have to be ready for, and again, the fermata, they learn to listen because they have to create a feeling of suspense there. So it has to be just the right length. In this piece, like in most of her pieces, you really need to think about fingering. The fingering cannot be left to chance. So it's a great piece also to teach the students the importance of fingering, the difference it can make in the interpretation of a piece when you have the right fingering. I had an adult student, a beginner, second year, but she's moving fast. She asked me a few weeks ago, when do you stop writing your fingering in your music? And I said, my answer was, of course, you never stop. You always need to think about fingering. But often it's seen as a weakness. You know, I should be able to remember. No, you have to decide and make sure that you register and you use the same fingering. There's a few things in that piece that make it challenging, but fun at the same time. The broken intervals between the hand, like this. I remember having lots of fun playing that. And also you heard me rushing. It's something we keep telling the students, don't rush, keep a pulse steady. So it's fun to have a piece where you actually have to rush. And the cluster at the end. So it's a very descriptive narrative music, and it appeals to the child's imagination that has to think about the story. Now, I'm more familiar with the French comptines than with the English songs for children, of course. So we have a few comptines about fleas, the flea and the elephant, the flea and the lice. The flea is not always nice. She can cause trouble. I remember the flea and the elephant, but she always wins, even if she's very small, because she's bright and witty. And I find that this is not a bad message to send to a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old child. Another piece I wanted to mention quickly, if you're looking for a level 1 piece for a student who's very musical, who likes to play slow, expressive pieces, there's a Little Beggar that's the right hand plays only on 5 notes, and the left hand has only 2 chords. So it's easy to learn for a beginner student, but it's really, really beautiful. Now, my next one, which is a big hit with kids, is the sewing machine. So you have the left hand that describes that is the sewing machine, and the right hand that to me is more the seamstress. So lively, pretty quick tempo in cut time, very spirited. It's one of the most showy pieces of the book. In G major, I was talking earlier that sometimes she goes off the beaten path. It's in G, but it ends if the right hand ends G, the right hand, the left hand, the lower note, the bass ends with D and E. So you end, but it's not a really ending. It's not really ending. It's up in the air, mid-air, suspension, unfinished. Of course, what are you working with this? The staccato touch, the notes have to have all the same length, steady, steady pulse, mechanical motion. The seamstress song in the right hand, lively, happy. You have both staccato and legato, and that kind of movement with the involvement of the wrists. So again, it's very comfortable. You're very relaxed playing that. The balance between both hands, of course. And again, the child describes a scene. In this one, you work with colors, dynamics. You have piano, più forte, crescendo, diminuendo. You have echo effect also, you know, I'm looking for, oh yeah, that's it. And then, so working with colors, but it leaves enough elements for the child to develop his or her own interpretation. One thing that's challenging, but again, exciting because it's fun, is the hand crossing. Yeah, and there's, again, talking about surprising things, dissonances. You have even a tritone there. Okay, Mirai au piano. This, the sewing machine is a level 2. Mirai au piano, it's a level 3, I would say. In this one, finger work, evenness of the 8 notes, 5 notes, 5 fingers pattern in the right hand. And then it's the left hand that does the melody. So, as I said, 5 notes, 5 finger patterns, very comfortable. There's a chromatic passage where you have to turn over the thumb. The tonalities, you go between G major, G minor. There's a very unusual chord progression at the end, leading to a plagal cadence. Sorry. That's very interesting in terms of sound. Again, she puts a few fingering challenges here with the descending sequences. The third going down, and then, and again, the involvement, the circular motion of the arm. Interesting dynamic contrast. There you get forte, mezzo forte, piano, and crescendo diminuendo. But it's always very logical, and it follows the line of the melody. As I mentioned, the melodies in the left hand. Again, you get staccato and legato. If the students at that point, I found that the chords at the end, the last 3 bars, would be a good opportunity to have the student using the right pedal. Often they're very keen. They want to know what are the pedals for, what do they do. So that's a great place to use it. So again, storytelling. Mireille is obviously practicing some Hanon exercises, some Clementi or some Czerny at the piano. Is the left hand saying something else? I mean, she seems happy to do it. And it reminds me a bit of the Debussy's Gradus at Parnassum. So again, that's connotation. My last one would be La Toupie, which is at level 4. That's lots of fun, but kind of tricky. You really have to start with the right finger. See, again, very, very playful. You're describing a top. So I always ask my student, okay, you have to have an image of your top. How big is it? Which colors? What does it do in the piece? What does the triplet illustrate at the end? Interesting to note that you go from G to A. That creates a feeling of imbalance, you know, it's just up in the air again. The challenges, okay, it's in A minor. The challenges are repeated notes with both second fingers in a very close position there, but also there. Where you have both hands on top of another. So, you know, which hand is at the back? The right hand, the left hand. Evenness, steadiness of pulse. Again, staccato, detached touch. So the length of the notes, they all have to sound the same. And again, you cannot but avoid you cannot but deal with the fingering, especially passages like that. You have to think, the child has to try and see what's the most comfortable. See, comfortable is an adjective that comes often in inner music. Playful and comfortable. The dynamics are pretty simple. Piano, forte. So the challenge is it's not there. The accents, make sure that you keep a beautiful sound there. So that's it for Melbonis. And now we're moving to Louise Farinck.
Correct, Louise Frank. So we're moving actually back because Louise was born in 1804 and began her piano studies with a former student of Muzio Clementi, and she went on to study with Moscheles and Hummel. At the age of 15, she went to the Conservatoire in Paris to study composition, although it's uncertain whether she was actually in a class or was studying privately because the composition classes were only open to men. She married Astrid Farank, a flute student, 10 years her senior, at the age of 17. Amazing how young these women were when they got married, and gave concerts throughout France with her husband. They grew tired, or he grew tired of the concert life, and together they opened a publishing house in Paris and became one of the leading publishers. Louise returned to her composition studies and continued her own composition career. She gained fame as a performer and was appointed professor of piano at the Paris Conservatoire, a position she held for 30 years. Despite all her successes with students, she was paid less than her male counterparts for nearly a decade. It was only the success of one of her compositions, her Nonette, did she demand and receive equal pay. Initially, she composed exclusively for the piano, earning praise from critics including Robert Schumann. She also wrote chamber works, 2 overtures, and 3 symphonies. Her 30 etudes from Opus 26 include etudes in every major and minor key and often are compared to Chopin's etudes. The etudes we're going to look at today are from Opus 50 and are more suited to an elementary or an intermediate piano student. So I'm going to put some music in the chat that you can download free of charge. Put that in now. And then I'm also going to screen share these works. Okay, so these are from the Opus 50. And we talked about circular motion, how Jael advocated for circular motion, Bonus, the same thing. So all of these ladies had very similar concepts. So it was interesting that Frank actually employed a lot of these ideas in her works before Jael actually wrote her method on pedagogy. So obviously the wheels were turning. It just took somebody to write a book about how to teach. So this is the first etude. So great for circular motion. As I mentioned earlier, I have a student that developed tension in his hand from continuously playing too fast. So this is what I gave him just to loosen the wrist and get the circular motion happening. So that's throughout the piece. There's also these wonderful sustained notes. So if you look at the right hand here, we have a quarter note, a quarter note, quarter note, quarter note. So all of these have to be held. So another technique, of course, the left hand notes all tied all the way through. I love her change of harmony. I think it's a beautiful piece. She doesn't indicate any dynamics except piano. There's a crescendo and then piano, crescendo, diminuendo. So it's a good piece to encourage students to become expressive in their playing. At bar 12 or line 4, she has beautiful harmonies. So going into from C major into E flat major and then really into G major. A bit of minor key in there. And again, held notes in the right hand. Back into C major like the beginning. So it's an incredibly beautiful etude, which isn't outrageously difficult to play, but has so many wonderful features. Would be a great recital piece as well. All right, then the next one we're going to look at. All of these Opus 50 are really different in character. In fact, One Eye Publications will be publishing the complete set of them. Personally, I used a lot of Hannon, some Czerny, and now that I've found these, I'm thinking these would be really great etudes to give students because each of them has one primary technical challenge in them. They're musical, however, and they're all so different. So it's a set, it'll really be a volume of a lot of variety of etudes. So this one is scales. a beautiful etude for that student that doesn't like to practice scales, because now it's not scales, it's an actual piece. But wonderful for learning evenness of touch in the scale passages. I really like it for the fingering as well, because if you play it with the wrong fingering, you end up with your thumb on a black key and you end up stumbling. So it's it's a great etude, and like I say, it's really an example of the variety of etudes in this particular collection. So fingering, also the two note slurs in the right hand and holding these right hand notes. So you're holding for the duration of the whole bar each time. So another technical challenge, just to be aware all the way through. All right, and then one more to show. And this is again circular motion, elegance in arpeggios. Now we talked about this floating off rests in the left hand. So here, before Jael actually talked about it, here's an example of where it's also useful. So floating off the left hand notes rather than making the sound linger slightly gives it a lot of musicality, using circular motion to support the fifth finger. A way I would encourage a student to learn this is to first begin with solid right hand chords. To get a clear idea of where the harmonies are going, and just to get the fingers in position so that you're not constantly looking for notes, learning it one line at a time, but with solid chords in the right hand. There's also a variety of phrasing in the left hand. So we've got the floating off, but when we get to the end of line one, a two note slur, so big, little, big, little, big, little. And then on the second page, all the legato in the left hand. So there's a lot of attention to detail. I keep saying it, these are little gems, really, and it's a whole collection of them. So One Eye Publications will be publishing the whole set. All right, and let's move back to Cecile and Ignatius Sancho.
Yes, Sancho. And before I start talking about Sancho, just one more talking about filiation. I just realized that Louise Farenc was a piano teacher at the Conservatoire de Musique de Paris, and Mel Bonis was a student at the Conservatoire. So she, by then Farenc would have left, of course. She died in 75 and Mel Bonis entered in 76. But I'm sure her presence and her contribution, her work was still very, very strong at the Conservatoire. So I'm sure Mel Bonis would have known about her works and would have followed her works before her career before she went into the Conservatoire. So it's really interesting to see the affiliation.
And Jael was also there. So all of these women, if they didn't actually physically encounter each other, they would have known about each other. And you can see this continuation of the same pedagogical ideas.
Yeah, and the change they brought in the way pianists were seeing the piano and the education, the pedagogy, the change in the approach in pedagogy.
Writing for children, because if you look at Claude Debussy, there is nothing at the lower levels by him. The easiest is the Children's Corner Suite. And isn't the first piece the lowest level about level 7 for Children's Corner Suite? So there's nothing like, in our grades 1 to 5, those crucial years where it's so important to develop techniques. So these ladies actually addressed the concerns of teaching children away from Clementi and Hannon and all these technical exercises, and gave children pieces with technique in them, but that are more imaginative and more appealing to children.
That's it. Thinking about the children as children rather than as young adults.
Or puppets.
Yeah. So anyway, to move on, I'll move quickly to Ignacio Sancho. I talked about, for those of you who followed the earlier the webinar we did last month, I already talked about Sancho. So you may wonder, why is he coming back? Because for me, he's a very transitional composer. So those of you who were there will remember about him. So I'll be very quick, just to mention that he was born on a slave ship. He was given to 3 British sisters when he was 2 years old, and he was rescued by the Duke and the Duchess of Montagu, who hired him as a free man and supervised his education. Both the Duke and Duchess were very high in the British hierarchy and very well connected. So, and he stayed linked with them throughout his whole life with them, and after their death, he was very close to one of their daughters and her husband. But to say that he was really part of the household, and the main house was called Broughton House, but it was also called the English Versailles. So because of the times he lived in, his dates are 1729, 1787, the milieu in which he evolved, and considering the style of his compositions, like I said, I see him as a transitional composer. On the one hand, he wrote minuets. I talked about those minuets last time. They're in the Baroque form. And on the other hand, he composed dances, to which he gave descriptive titles, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. They could be about a specific location, trip to Dillington, Culford Heath, or the name of the person, of a person he knew, like the Royal Bishop, the Duchess of Devonshire's. This type of nationalistic dances were very popular in England at the time. But with those, he also announced the Écossaise and the German dance by Schubert, for example, who are at level 1 and level 3. Furthermore, as we know, the Duke and Duchess were Francophiles. They were passionate about anything French. So Sancho was therefore immersed in that culture through him and his wife. And it's easy to see the link that he represents between the works of the French clavecinists like Couperin. You can think of the Reapers, level 2, the Trifle, level 3, or Dandrieux, the Fifers, level 3 also. And the pieces from both albums of For the Young by Schumann, The Happy Farmer, The Wild Rider, and by Tchaikovsky. I'm thinking Morning Prayer, The March of the Tin soldiers. So we can see that the romantic trend of shorter pieces inspired by extra musical subjects and given descriptive titles gained in popularity in the 19th century. There's more and more pieces telling us stories, works that brings us to use our imagination and to develop our own interpretation. So those dances give us as teachers two directions really to explore with our students. The dance, rhythm, steady pulse, character of the specific dance, and the descriptive piece that would be either a portrait or the description of a place. Now, those would have been written actually to be danced in line dance formation. And you can see on the original score that it includes instructions on how to dance it. They are considered as belonging to the dances of the English Regency period. So you think Jane Austen. And as such, they would actually have been danced until the late 1830s. So well into the Romantic period. So that explains it, that we included it today. Now, if you go on YouTube, there are actually two of those dances that are danced by the Hampshire Regency dancers at regencydances.org, and there are Strawberries and Cream and Mungo's Delight. So very quickly, there's a Lady Mary Montagu reel that's coupled with the Lord Dalkeith's reel for the level 4. So the first one, all those pieces are very, very short, as you can see. They're in 2 parts with repeats. And they're pretty simple. There's not many, there's some of them that have articulation, but most don't, and they don't have dynamics. So it's up to the students to think about something. So Lady Mary goes like, it's in B flat. So Lady Mary is, of course, the Duchess. Strong bond, Sancho stayed with her until her death, and they were so close that she actually left him a pension. At the same time, it's a dance and a portrait. So the character of it, she was a duchess, a woman from the high British aristocracy. So it's part of the dance that are more delicate. Some of those dances were danced only by women, by the way. So not too fast, light and elegant. It's in B flat, again, in 2 parts. Left hand, quarter note accompaniment, so detached like a cello, the need to keep pulse very steady. You have to think about the articulations in the right hand. Technically, I would say broken thirds in the right hand, broken chord, so and print. And see lots of thirds, broken thirds. Again, the importance of fingering. Same passages have, we'll come back, but we'll have different fingerings because of a change of direction. See, for example, but there, so you end differently. So you have to think about that and change the fingering to accommodate that. You have to think about the fingerings for chords, arpeggios. And it's essential to think about that to assure the precision of rhythms and the steadiness of pulse. Otherwise, you'll run in trouble. You know, there's no guessing there. because the way it's written, it falls really nicely under the hands. You have some jumps in the left hand. So I found with those pieces also, they're ideal to talk about the structure of a piece, perfect cadences, dominant and tonic chords, introduce the Roman numerals at grade 4, the phrase construction, 2 bars plus 2 bars. The Lord Dalkia is in clear contrast with this. See that lively character, faster, louder, finger work, and again, arm gravity also. You switch from this to this. You have some octaves and in the left hand, and the battery with your arm, you know, in and out. That's lots of fun. While, yeah, you'll have an interesting, you know, coordination. You know, like horizontal versus vertical. One hand will jump while the other hand is going to be close to the keys. So that's that, you alternate between the two. Again, fingering is really important. Left hand, beginning, 5 fingers, 5 note positions on both black and white keys. So it's very comfortable. The next one I'm going to talk about is Bushy Park. So Bushy Park was, probably still is, the second largest of the London Royal Parks, north of Hampton Court, the big palace, well known because it was Henry VIII's. Famous for roaming herds of red and fallow deers, its gardens and waterways. So it's in F major, in 6/8. So you have the groups of 3/8 notes. Interesting thing, you start with the pickup throughout the piece. So they have to be clear and you have to be already in the character of the dance. So see, it's a fun piece. Because of the pickup, you have to think about the phrasing and about where to breathe, technique, precision of rhythm, stability of pulse, of course. Again, broken third and chords. So it helps to play them solid to get the handprint. And the coordination, right hand, left hand also. Simple structure, there's no modulation. So again, a great piece to introduce the students to 4-bar phrases, parallel and contrasting responses, perfect cadence, patterns. It helps them help them to understand the structure of the pieces. And of course, it makes memorizing easier. So see, those pieces are clear. The structure is clear. It's simple enough, so it's easy to see. Also, you have some jumps here and there that are interesting. And my last one is going to be the Duchess of Devonshire. out again. So that one is at the level 3. It's in G major, modulates to D major. Structure AA, BB, CC. So it's a bit longer than the others. It's a bit more elaborate, more challenging also. You have the scale passage and broken chords, octaves, 5-note patterns, skips, and of course, with those 16 notes that I see for there's not that many in that set. You have to think about the evenness of the 16th note. Now, again, who was she? Charlotte Cavendish. So again, it's somebody that he knew. She was the wife of a statesman who would later become Prime Minister of Great Britain. So again, very, slower than the other piece that I played earlier. More elegant. At the same time, it's a dance and a portrait. You have a lot of skips there. And again, it's built on many chords, scales. In this piece, and again, there's maybe 2 or 3. He wrote the slurs himself. But there's no dynamics. So you think of the articulations, maybe more. I'm looking at, for example, bar 3, or even bar 1. You could group them by 2. So it's up to the students to think about articulations and dynamics. So that concludes my input with Sancho. But those are really interesting pieces. And as I said, they're dances, lively, well written, but they also evoke places, portraits, so that appeals to the imagination of the children and sparks their interest for history, how they lived, what was his life, and feeds their interest and feed their interest for the piano and the pieces, their interpretation also, their thinking. It makes it easy for them to connect. And I think that's so important, that the students connect with the music. And it's not always obvious, connecting with music that was written like 200 years ago.
I think, though, all of these compositions have tremendous child appeal to them, because so often, I think of my own teaching and trying to find pieces that motivate children, and they like titles, they like fanciful titles. And then I'm always looking for something that will give them skills, whether it's a technical skill or encourage musicality. So it's terrific that we're discovering this huge array of music by composers we never even knew existed, just where we now in May. So 14 months ago, I didn't even realize most of these composers ever lived. So it's just a continuing journey. It's an awful lot of fun to discover all these works and hopefully, bring them back to life and, students enjoy them. So it's great doing these webinars. We will be back in the fall. In the meantime, if you are living in Ontario and would like to attend the ORMTA conference, Cecile and I are doing a presentation on Friday, July the 22nd at 10:45. If you don't live in Ontario, why don't you come visit our wonderful province? If you attend the conference, it's a tax write-off. And come and meet us. And by the way, it will be the first time Cecile and I actually meet in person, which will also be pretty exciting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Definitely.
Yeah, I hope everything can work out in that conference and go ahead as planned. I'm sure it will. And I wish I could be there myself, but I won't be, unfortunately. But hopefully we can all gather maybe the following year in Edmonton for the CFMTA conference. Summer of 2023 would be really nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, anyone have any questions for Cecile or Eleanor? They presented so much here today. Once again, as always, it's so rich. It's wonderful to hear all this repertoire and to get to some of the pedagogy and detail behind that you're sharing is just really, really valuable for all of us. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to just throw it in the Q&A right now or raise your hand, use the raise your hand feature, and I can bring you on live here and you can chat if it's too complicated or something you want to discuss. Although it tends to be a pretty quiet crowd. And I know you're all enjoying everything because you tell me that after the fact when I email you the links, the replay links. So nevertheless, you'll all get the replay link here today, a little bit later. Once again, just want to thank both of you for sharing everything. And again, next Friday, folks, we're going to have another mock exam webinar. And so I hope you can join me for that. Contemporary Idioms Level 5 Piano. And so I think you're going to want to check that out. You'll get some information on that from me just in advance. A couple of comments there. Thanks, Cheryl, for sharing that in the chat box. Okay, I think we'll sign off for today, everyone. Any final words, Cecile or Eleanor? Have you already said what you wanted to say?
Love doing these.
Awesome. Well, same here. Yeah. Yeah, I'm really happy to do this, and thanks for joining us into our research. And yeah,
we look forward to more in the fall. We're going to definitely have both of you back in a big way through next academic year. Okay,
have a good night, everybody.
Yeah, good day, everyone. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next Friday. Bye for now.
Bye.